Lesson 5.3 Rethinking the Innovation Philanthropy, Impact Finance, and Banking Foundations. New drivers of innovation can also be found in experiences originating from the transformation of philanthropy. While in the past the efforts of philanthropy system were mainly directly at satisfying the demands of the donor, philanthropy is increasingly abandoning its traditional approach of giving alms or charity. Philanthropists are evolving, stepping out of their consolidated spheres to acquire, play an active part in the promotion of innovation initiatives targeting crucial issues for the community. Their innovative strength comes from their transformation in a relatively short span of time from being donors to become grant makers and then developing into the key players today of a traditional known as strategic philanthropy. Donors are benefactors who, in various capacities, providing funding and or place their own assets at the service of individuals or groups in an effort to offer relief to people in hardship, providing charitable works or support projects of social value. Grantmakers instead seek to establish a cooperative relationship with the recipient, with the aim of ensuring the sustainability and survival of the grant over time. Working with other grant makers, they insist on the scalability of the initiative, the two-way flow of information, and a focus on creating, maintaining, and managing conditions for long-term sustainability. Grant makers are interested in achieving sustainable returns on their investment, not only from a financial point of view, given that their capital is patient, they are not under any speculative pressures, but also and above all in terms of its economic and social impact. In this way, their interest lies chiefly in the possibility of resolving critical issues and enforcing change, which can and must be subject to measurement and assessment. With strategic philanthropy, donations and grants become true investments in integrated projects, able to generate a multiplier effect and trigger radical social change. Strategic philanthropy is based on focused research, creative design and planning, strategies of proven effectiveness, accurate implementation, impact assessment, and in-depth follow-ups to constantly monitor expected outcomes. For this perspective, an investment in is meaningful if it enables set objectives to be delivered and effectively improves the quality of life of the people and communities it targets. Here we are witnessing a processing and at times contradictory transformation of a model with deep historical roots in a fundamentally self-centered social paternalism, shifting the focus of action onto long-term strategic goals pursued in partnership with other players. Rather than merely providing donation on an occasional basis, the emphasis placed on the in-depth assessment of the impacts and outcomes of initiative reflects a capacity to develop innovation in both substance and process and to make a difference on a social phenomenon. Finally, the highly dynamic nature of this transformation is borne out by recent processes in strategic philanthropy to have emerged at the international level aimed at promoting the action of local territorial players, associations, groups, bottom-up initiatives, etc. Assessed on the basis of a due diligence process to ascertain their quality and reliability, by ensuring their funding without limitation on the investments they can make. Funding provided in this way is to be managed by the recipient as an enabling factor of their capacity to address emerging problematics and to respond effectively and efficiently to critical territorial issues. Another new driver of innovation that is particularly interesting and innovative can be found in impact investing. Thanks to the open and flexible approach of such investor to ROI, return on investment, impact investing focuses its attention on direct and indirect initiatives, generally relying on patent capital, which allows investors to sit and wait for returns and outcomes to emerge, which are not always achieved in the time frames required by investors of conventional capital. Independently of the capital mobilized, impact investing is of particular interest because it lays the groundwork for the potential rethinking of the relationship between the private sector and the public sector in addressing important social changes. Through their initiative, impact investors seek to make an impact for the benefit of the community, to help solve social problems that are difficult to govern with ordinary public funding alone. Their efforts can also be assessed in terms of the saving generated for the public purse by the containment of the adverse effect entailed by an aggravation of the problem and or of the broader implication for society. The saving generated and obtained at no cost to government, which at the same time finds itself relieved of the need to address the deterioration of the issue targeted by the investment, give rise to the opportunity to reward the impact investors, which keeps the process rolling as with the remunerated capital recouped. They can make new investments in new challenges. The innovative contribution of such an investment model goes beyond the impact made on resolving issues, virtuously paired with the public saving entailed, by offering a new model and approach to governing the needs of territories that breaks the vicious downward spiral in which social challenges and public finance limits are trapped. Banking foundations are another player with a widely recognized capacity to generate, to introduce, and even govern innovation. By virtue of the specific territorial focus of their institutional remit, they are able to mobilize any part of their significant assets, while offering the strategic vision they are increasingly acquiring through the high impact initiatives they pursue in the various fields in which they are engaged. Banking foundation 1. Are required by law to focus direction on the local territory. tied to where they were originally created and where it's easier to identify a social issue and take action to govern it. 2. Have immense financial assets at their disposal connected with the transfer of equity interest in their relative banks. And 3. Have acquired also at the nationwide and international levels the capacity for the strategic vision needed to play a coordinated role in major, medium, long-term projects. Thanks to their position in relation to other territorial players, banking foundations today are one of the most determined and determining factors for local development. Their subsidiary role has moved from being one of promoting simple initiatives to help address social problems to become much more decisive and strategic with respect to local government. Initiatives by banking foundations that target issues of major social importance and becoming less sporadic and increasingly more strategic in their approach. By taking up new social challenges such as, for example, growing social insecurity and the problem of immigration, in practice, they play a substitute role, filling the gap left by the failures and inadequacy of policy making and local government. The powerful rise of new players has been an autonomous and independent process, but it combines with the width and thin space in relation to the difficulties that limit the action and narrow the possibilities for intervention of traditional innovation drivers. Endogenous structural difficulties and the critical problems that emerge when faced with scenarios that call for ever faster reaction times, dynamism and growing resources are undermined the capacity of the traditional helices, government, industry and university, to make an impact and heighten the risk of marginalization. The triple helix model had the strength to steer a phase in which local and national government had the financial resources at its disposal, at times quite massive, to act as promoter and or regulator of innovation processes, which roll through in university and research centers to reach industry and public administration. Over time, that model became enriched and consolidated based on the reciprocal recognition of roles. Since then, cracks have emerged in, or disintegrated, some of the conditions underpinning the roles of those players under the model, as government, industry, and even university face structural and economic difficulties that they are struggling to address and govern. The most significant impacts can be seen in 1. The contraction in public funding available. 2. The constant insecurity of political leaders. 3. A narrowing of the time frames for the performance assessment of public sector managers. 4. The growing pressure on industry to focus more on contingent matters. And 5. Pressures on the freedom of research. The economic recession paired with budget restriction tied the public debt burden as tightened the purse strings and left the government short of the necessary funding needed to play a strong authoritative role in economic planning and regulation. not only has funding dried up with respect to the past, but political timeframes also has changed, heightening uncertainty and insecurity and undermining the stability and long-term continuity of policy making. Government is pressed to deliver appreciable results immediately in order to be perceived as effective and remain popular with voters. The space for maneuver of public management has become strongly conditioned by the need to deliver results as soon as possible, with assessment times now comparable to those of the market. The emphasis on working on matters circumscribed to contingent issue in response to specific, clearly defined issue, which sum up the primary needs of industry, is a powerful driver steering research to be monodisciplinary and highly specialized in its focus. It's easy to argue that to resolve a contingent problem under the absolute constraint of spending as little as possible, what is needed is a targeted and efficient formula able to produce solutions that quickly relieve the commissioning enterprise of the problem that constitutes a hurdle to the expansion of its businesses. To satisfy such an expectation within the strict limits set, primarily for economic reason, but also cultural mindset, it's better to avoid looking at the phenomenon in all its complexity. That's call for the sacrificing of broader implication, which would require the efforts of further study and exploration, but above all, it calls for a restriction on the number of players involved, limiting them solely to those strictly tied to the specific context of demand. As such, it's rather difficult to prospect the opening of new research fronts that, given the multidimensional nature of phenomena, cross the boundaries of different disciplines, as that would entail additional direct and indirect costs connected with the engagement of other researchers to the creation of research infrastructure and coordination of multidisciplinary teams.